Ben Shapiro, editor-in-chief of DailyWire.com and host of his own podcast, The Ben Shapiro Show. Ben, yeah, we got a lot to say, and you're always good at getting it in a speedy fashion.
Yeah, I mean that is my specialty. So if people want you to slow down, man, I don't know what to tell them.
It's gonna get ugly. All right. Ben, happy New Year to you. It's great to talk to you.
You too, and it's a very happy New Year to you, Larry O'Connor.
Well, see, now that's the thing. I can read between the lines, and yesterday there was a little between you and Dana Lash and myself and a couple of others of us who used to work at Breitbart, and for one reason or another, mostly one reason, we found ourselves leaving. We all sort of, thought of each other. You were all in our prayers. So I wanted to talk to you about your initial reflections of yesterday's events with Steve Bannon and the President of the United States with that unbelievable public humiliation in his statement.
I mean, can one body contain such joy? I mean, to say that Steve Bannon is a bad guy is to misdefine the word bad by a few leaks. Steve is a leech on the ass of power. Steve is a barnacle that attaches himself to any whale that he thinks will get him where he wants to go. And he did that with Trump, and Trump wasn't going to stand for it. And one thing that I have always liked about Trump, despite all my criticisms of him, is that when he hits the nail, he hits the nail. And that statement about Steve is the truest thing that anyone has ever said about anything in the history of mankind, or at least in the top three. So it's, I'm happy to see that the president, and mostly I'm happy, so there's two things. Number one, am I personally happy when a bad person like Steve Bannon pays a particularly high political price? Yes, of course. But trying to put that aside, I'm also happy that I think the President of the United States is disassociated from a guy who is a really negative effect on him. I think that Bannon was always hyped up by the media. I don't think that he had any really marked impact on the campaign. He obviously had no impact in the White House except for the negative at the very beginning with the badly rolled out travel ban. He was marginalized by April. He had already been relegated to his small office with the whiteboard full of promises.
Yeah.
No one was paying attention to him by then. And then he made it his job to basically call the New York Times every day and leak things about the administration. I mean, you've noticed. I mean, people have noticed that the leaks have sort of stopped since Bannon left.
Yeah.
The leaks have slowed wildly since Bannon left, and Trump himself said this, and so did Trump Jr., and I think they're both exactly correct based on the available objective evidence of the number of leaks that are coming out of the administration. Steve was always driven by Steve. Not only was he driven by Steve, he was also putting the president in a position to embrace people and groups that reflected really negatively on the president. All the alt-right stuff doesn't hit Trump, except for the fact that Bannon is associated with Trump. So I think that it's a good move by the president. I think that the last 6 weeks of policy, I was very critical of Trump, obviously, in the run-up to the election. I've been critical when I think it's been warranted. But the last 6 weeks of policy have been excellent. Not only did they have nothing to do with Bannon, they don't get done with Bannon there.
Yeah.
I mean, they get done with Bannon gone. And I think there's a reason that Mitch McConnell, who has been widely maligned for some good reasons and some bad reasons, Mitch McConnell got Trump his tax bill, and Steve Bannon was busy ripping on Mitch McConnell at the same time and leaking to various news outlets about how crazy Trump was, apparently.
Any objective observer should be able to look at the first half of the Trump 2017 and the back half of the Trump 2017 and see a marked difference. And it does seem to have occurred right at the time where both Reince Priebus and Steve Bannon left, actually. I mean, unlike Steve Bannon, I think that Reince Priebus is a pretty good person, but he was ineffective in his job as well. And maybe because he was working alongside Steve Bannon, Ben.
I mean, that's right. I mean, look at the date stamp on when Bannon leaves. Bannon leaves in August, right, mid-August. Every good thing that basically happened this year, with the exception of Gorsuch, which was going to happen in the first couple of weeks, every good thing has happened after August.
Yeah.
Right? All of the good stuff. And I think that that's not a coincidence. Steve Bannon was always focused chiefly on maximizing his own brand, on maximizing his own perception as leader of a movement that he thinks that he created, when in reality he just jumped on the back of the Tea Party, and then he jumped on Trump's back, and he jumped on Sarah Palin's back, and he jumped on Andrew's back, and I can safely say that I was the first person to, in high-profile public fashion, state that I thought that Steve was a malign influence and a cancerous tumor on the conservative movement.
Absolutely.
I think that's a pretty safe. I mean, I did it pretty publicly in March 2016.
I was just about to say that
people came around to the truth on this one.
For people who don't know that, I just wanted to say that this is Ben Shapiro did not wait for the president to say this about Steve Bannon before you were in front of most of us on this. I haven't said much. I've said some negative things about Steve Bannon on the air in some of my writing, but generally I don't talk about him at all. whether good or bad, I just sort of have ignored Steve Bannon as much as I could.
Well, you're smarter than I, but yes. You live a happier life, my friend. But, yeah.
Let me.
I've tried to ignore. I mean, the truth is that this year particularly, I've tried to ignore because I don't think he's that important. What's driven me up a wall is the media's decision to elevate Bannon as a sort of chaotic figure inside the administration who's the real philosopher king of the administration, which was always sheer nonsense, and then to elevate him after leaving as he's the one who's going to rival the conservative movement. He's going to control the new conservative. He's the leader of one of the Civil War factions. And like, Steve Bannon isn't the leader of anything. I can't even put on a shirt correctly.
So, wait, which one? He wears 3 at a time.
That's what I mean. I mean, like, if you have to wear 3 shirts, you're doing So just like in the bedroom, if you have to do it 3 times, you did it wrong the first time.
Oh, Ben Shapiro. My goodness. You go playing a little blue here on WMAL. This is not a podcast, my friend.
Yeah, I know.
Ben, let me ask you this then, because that leads us to today's speculation and today's discussion, which is the future of Breitbart News. Now, I'm sure you saw what Matt Drudge did today. And let's face it, Matt Drudge continues to be an incredibly influential figure, specifically, certainly when it comes to commenting on Breitbart, because Andrew Breitbart, the man whose name the site bears, worked closely side by side with Matt Drudge in the earliest days. He knows all of the people there. But frankly, one could argue that much of Breitbart's traffic up until maybe the last year and a half was all benefit of coming from.
That's right. It's not. That's not a one could argue. That is a pure stone cold objective fact by any metric, right? I mean, Drudge linked to Breitbart a lot for several years after Andrew died because I think that Matt wanted to I don't want to get inside Matt's head because obviously Matt is better at this than anyone else on the internet. But, Matt, I think, felt a certain duty toward Breitbart because he was friends with Andrew and worked closely with Andrew, and also because, the folks at Breitbart were pretty good. I mean, you worked there, so they were pretty good at attempting to kind of see where Matt saw the news cycle going and then maybe mirror the coverage to some of what Matt wanted in terms of the news coverage, which I think is a good tactic, by the way, because Matt has the best news sense of anybody in the business. Yeah. But Matt Drudge obviously does not like Bannon. He obviously thinks that Bannon is a self-promoting egomaniac, which he is. I'd seen reports, there were media reports a few months ago that Bannon had been going around telling people that he ran Drudge. You say that in front of Drudge, and I'm pretty sure that that's going to send your relationship to the bottom of the ocean. So it wouldn't be surprising that Bannon says that kind of stuff, actually.
So what are you – yeah, no, I wouldn't – that's the thing. So many of the things that we've all heard about Steve Bannon saying over the last couple of months, I think a lot of us have looked at and said, oh, yeah, that sounds exactly like the Steve Bannon I know saying those things. So given that, I mean, Matt Drudge tweets out today, I'll read part of it, the terrific Larry Solov, who is currently the CEO and president of Breitbart, and Susie Breitbart, Andrew's widow, will take Breitbart into the fresh future. I mean, that suggests that Matt Drudge is predicting that Bannon is gone. And one has to wonder how Bannon can stay in that position if he's got the president of the United States, a very important figure with regard to the readership of Breitbart News, saying that he's a loser.
Well, when I say that this is richly deserved, it is because when you burn every bridge you ever had in order to get where you want to go, and then it turns around that you're on an island, right? And all the bridges have been burned. That's basically where Bannon finds himself. He was cut off from the money by rumor at least a couple of weeks ago by the Mercers. So he no longer has their money to play with. He obviously has not only no political capital, Trump just drilled a hole into his head, right? But pretty much physically took an actual drill bit and placed it on Steve Bannon's head. I mean, it's the most brutal political takedown I've ever seen in public. Rosie O'Donnell should feel lucky that Trump didn't treat her like he treated Steve Bannon.
That's a great point.
So he lost his political wherewithal, and now he's lost his sort of media connections. Nobody in the media is defending him today. He has a couple of allies, folks like Sean Hannity he's friendly with, who have sort of been trying to soft pedal it a little bit and suggest that this is all just media blow-ups, which it is not. Once the president sounds off on it, this is no longer just a media story.
That's
now
right.
This is a political story.
That's right.
And so, Bannon's on an island by himself, and I don't see how let's put it this way. I see a path for him to survive at Breitbart simply through inertia of the leadership. I could see Larry, you and I both know Larry, I could certainly see Larry Solov, who was Andrew's business partner and I think a fundamentally good human being, but I think he can be weak in these sorts of situations. You could certainly see Larry basically Bannon try to convince him to wait this out because Bannon is a very forceful figure and Larry is not quite as forceful. Mm-hmm. But I think that it would be a foolish move. I think the best thing that Larry could do at this point would be to fire Bannon. I think Susie probably agrees. I think they should both move to fire Bannon and then let Alex run the place. I mean, Alex was always the guy who was running the day-to-day, and he's been capable of that for years. So I don't really see the benefit to Breitbart of keeping around a guy who said that he was the heart of the base and then proceeded to stab Trump in the back. And then Trump turned around, as he should, and just eviscerated it.
And then said you were a nobody and you never were anybody. By the way, this is the fun thing about talking to a public figure like Ben Shapiro, who also happens to be a friend. When we talk about these things and people that we know, it becomes sort of like we're just having a conversation. When you say Alex, you mean Alex Marlow, who is currently the editor-in-chief of Breitbart News. He's the first person that Andrew hired. Let's talk about Andrew for a minute, because he's sort of the invisible figure watching all of this transpire. And yesterday it really did hit me, seeing what happened with Steve Bannon, seeing the reaction from so many people, and seeing the reaction from the president. I had to take a moment, Ben, to sort of think about Andrew and think about how far all of us have come and how far his site has come and where we are now from where we started. And my God, you look at that site and you look at Stephen Bannon and his impact and what happened with the president yesterday, and we are so far from what Andrew first envisioned for all of us and for his site.
100%. 100%. I mean, this is the thing that's so tragic. There's a picture, I mean, you know about this, obviously you were in it, right? And there's the picture that we took right after Andrew died, right before the funeral. We were all going to drive to the funeral together, and there's a picture of all of the sort of top figures at Breitbart, and it's people ranging from Alex Marlow to Joel Pollack to John Nolte. All three of whom are still there, but John was left for a while and worked with me over at Daily Wire. And 3/4 of those people are gone. Right, virtually everybody is gone, and that was almost entirely due to Steve's malign influence on the website. I mean, I think that Steve turned. There's so many ways in which what Breitbart was not what Breitbart.com became, and that ranges from his focus. Right, Andrew was very culturally focused. The site originally was very culturally focused. It turned into an almost solely political baton wielded for DC insider stuff, which is what Steve wanted it to be. It was not. It was a weapon against untruth. It was not just a weapon against media figures he didn't like. It was a weapon against untruth, which is why Andrew always had prized going after, CNN more than going after MSNBC, not because he hated CNN, but because he thought CNN was dishonest about how they approached politics in a way MSNBC was not. And it turned instead into Steve doesn't like a political figure. That political figure has to get hit now. Or Steve likes a political figure. But do you think Andrew ever would have stood for the idea that there was a credible allegation of sexual molestation against a candidate that the editors believed and admitted they believed, and then he's sending reporters down to try and discredit the accusers? I mean, Alex, who I like, right? I'm friends with Alex, or I was at least. Alex legitimately admitted that in a public interview. He said we all believed that the allegations were probably true, but we had to defend Trump and Roy Moore, and so we actually sent reporters down there to discredit credible accusers who say they were raped when they were, or there was an attempted molestation or rape when they were 14 years old. I mean, Andrew, not only would Andrew never have stood for that, Andrew would have gone ballistic over that. I mean, this is the reason why I left Breitbart in the first place. The reason I left Breitbart was not over all the Trump stuff. The reason I left Breitbart is because Stephen Bannon decided that it was more important to be close to the Trump campaign than to stand up for his own reporter. And I knew that they were a pro-Trump site, and I was writing for them for months as a guy who was obviously pro-Cruz during the primary.
Right. That
was fine with me. Every outlet has its own editorial bias, right? We have our editorial bias at the Daily Wire. That's fine. Then my problem was that Bannon was the type of guy who changed a publication that was agenda-driven and ideologically driven into a publication that was personal profit-driven, and the only person who mattered in that calculation was Steve Bannon and his capacity to translate public power into personal power.
You said that Larry, and we've only got a couple of minutes left here, you said Larry Soloff, who is Andrew Breitbart's literally oldest and dearest friend. They grew up together on the same block. They've known each other since they were 4 years old. Larry came to work with Andrew as his partner, and then with Andrew's sudden passing, inherited the company, basically, and has been overseeing it since then. You said that he should get rid of Steve Bannon and have Alex Marlow run the place. A lot of people are making predictions about Breitbart today, but you and I and a handful of us can make those predictions from a place of a pretty strong knowledge base because we've known these people intimately. Make a prediction. What do you think is going to happen over there?
Again, I think that if it's almost entirely a 50-50 shot. I think that it's a 50-50 shot that Bannon stays or that he goes, and it really depends on who's in Larry's ear. Because I think that all of the momentum is Bannon goes. I think all of the brains in the room would suggest Bannon has to go. But again, I think that Larry he can be a creature of inertia. As much as I like Larry, and I think Larry's a good person, Larry can be a creature of inertia, and Steve exerts a lot of influence on Larry. So The question is, can Steve talk himself out of the abyss one last time? Right. That's really all this is about at this point.
Because talk himself out or bully his way out.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this would be a hugely negative move for Breitbart to keep around a guy who's now directly at odds with the president of the United States and who's never getting back in, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, all this talk about, well, maybe Trump will come around and be nice to him again. There is no coming back once you've been turned into Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru from Episode 4 of Star Wars. Right? Once you've been reduced to an actual flaming skeleton, it's pretty difficult for the president to start treating you as a confidant again.
Yeah, there is no walking back that statement from the President of the United States. I had never read anything like that, and it was earth-shattering. By the way, Ben Shapiro's headline on this story yesterday at the Daily Wire, Trump sets Bannon on fire, uses ashes to fertilize his garden. That's about what happened. Ben, good talking to you, sir.
You too. Good to talk to you.
Thank you for joining us today on a pretty momentous occasion. Ben Shapiro, dailywire.com, Ben Shapiro Show, and all the other great things that Ben Shapiro does.